That night, the ballroom shimmered with golden lights and soft music. Glasses clinked in toasts while laughter filled the air, and I watched my wife twirl on the dance floor in a flawless white dress, portraying the perfect picture of happiness. Yet, something about her movements, the way her eyes sparkled as she danced with another man, a guest I barely recognized, made the atmosphere feel heavy, almost suffocating. At first, I dismissed it as paranoia. After all, it was our wedding, the celebration of a lifetime that was just beginning. She laughed a little too loudly, and her fingers lingered on his shoulder longer than necessary. I swallowed my suspicion along with a bitter sip of champagne and forced a smile. "Are you jealous again?" she whispered as she passed me, her lips barely moving but brimming with disdain. It hit me like a punch in the stomach. It wasn't the first time I had been labeled jealous, possessive, suspicious, but that night, at the exact moment she pulled away and he placed his hand on the curve of her back with an intimacy that made me clench my fists, I realized maybe I wasn't the only one in the wrong. I watched, needing to be sure, every lingering look, every accidental touch that felt calculated, every muffled laugh between them tore me apart inside. The hours dragged, slicing through my resolve. When the music finally faded and the guests began to leave, she was still close to him. I tried to confront her, asking about the man and how they knew each other, but she rolled her eyes and dismissed me as irrational. "He's just a friend," she insisted, yet his words carried a calculated lilt that contradicted the firmness of someone telling the truth. "If you can't trust me now, maybe you shouldn't have married me." Her words left a bitter taste in my mouth, but they didn't erase the image of them together. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, it needed to be wrong, and I had to find out. In the following days, doubts gnawed at me like poison. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was all in my head, but each time she left the house dressed too nicely to meet friends, every hidden message that arrived, and every excuse for being late reignited the flames of suspicion. So, I did what any desperate person would do, I started following her. It wasn't easy. My heart raced whenever I saw her smile at her phone screen while driving. I tracked her to a cafe where he was waiting at a table in the back. They laughed, he held her hand for too long. My eyes burned, but I couldn't act, not yet. I needed proof. A desperate need to uncover the truth clawed at me, partly to punish myself, or perhaps to find a reason to escape as the victim, the betrayed man that everyone would support. But nothing prepared me for what I actually discovered. She had lied to me with frightening ease. The man she danced with at the wedding reception wasn't just an acquaintance, he had been part of her routine for months, messages, calls, hidden encounters. I found it all, and the worst? I learned that some of our friends knew. They had seen them together even before the wedding. Anger burned within me, accompanied by an icy chill down my spine. How could I have been so blind? I couldn't sleep anymore. Sleepless nights were spent retracing every moment of our relationship, searching for the point where everything had begun to crumble, but the worst was yet to come. My obsession with answers led me to confront the truth in ways I could never have predicted. The lies ran much deeper than I had imagined, and as I contemplated how to expose them, how to make her pay for what she had done, I realized that perhaps I wasn't the only one cast into the shadows of that betrayal. The day I chose to confront her, fate played a cruel trick on us, and what transpired changed everything. I prepared myself to face her, but her reaction that night shifted everything. When she realized that I knew everything, she tried to shift the blame. "Are you stalking me? Are you invading my privacy? Who's at fault here?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She tried to make me feel guilty, and the lover? He smiled, as if I were losing a game I never knew I was playing. But I wasn't willing to lose, not after everything I had unearthed. I had something against them, something that could destroy them both, and I wouldn't hesitate to use it. Because sometimes, when you're pushed to the limit, you discover you're capable of things you never imagined you could do. That's when everything spiraled out of control. The romantic dinner I had planned to clear everything up turned into an emotional battlefield. She lied again. He showed up outside as if he had a right to be there. The confrontation was inevitable. But what happened afterward made me realize that revenge isn't always a choice, sometimes, it's a necessity. In the end, I was faced with two options: Let her ruin what little I had left or turn the tide once and for all. That's what I did. The plan was underway, but what no one expected was that an even bigger secret would surface before I could finish what I started. Because her lover was lying too, not just for her, but for me. And what he hid could destroy us all. Welcome to the channel. Here, we do not support, encourage, or romanticize any type of betrayal. Our stories are fictional, but they serve as a powerful warning about how infidelity can destroy lives, relationships, and families. Get ready to dive into an intense narrative full of twists and turns and overwhelming emotions. Hold on tight, because what you're about to hear will shake you. Good story, and good luck, you will need it. Lucas watched Anna walk across the room with a bright smile, her white dress gliding across the floor as if made of clouds. There was something about her that always fascinated him. Maybe it was how she seemed to light up any room, or the way her eyes met as even in the middle of a crowd. That night, however, something felt different. While everyone celebrated, toasted, and embraced, Lucas felt a slight pressure in his chest, a discomfort he couldn't explain. He tried to shake it off, forcing himself to focus on the moment. After all, this was their wedding, the beginning of a new life. But the sensation persisted, subtle like a distant echo of something that already existed without form. Anna laughed, spinning on the dance floor to upbeat music while Lucas chatted with friends. He couldn't stop looking at her. Pride swelled within him to see her so happy, but also a pang of insecurity that he hated feeling. Anna had always been outgoing, spontaneous, and charming, part of what had made him fall in love with her from their first meeting in a cozy cafe, where they exchanged shy glances and nervous laughs. He knew he was in front of someone special. She possessed that rare kind of beauty that didn't intimidate but welcomed, coupled with a natural charisma that made everyone want to be around her. He, on the other hand, had always been more reserved, observant rather than talkative. But with Anna, he felt different. She made him laugh, loosen his bonds, and challenged him in ways he had never experienced. Their relationship grew quickly, with a solid foundation built on deep conversations, shared dreams, and endless nights planning for the future. Lucas liked to think he knew Anna like no one else. He knew her quirks, her fears, and those little things that made her happy, like receiving flowers for no reason or finding affectionate notes scattered around the house. He was certain he made her happy too. There was nothing he wouldn't do for her. But that night, as he watched her dance with other guests, something inside him began to question whether he really knew her as well as he thought. Anna returned to the table, laughing at something one of her friends had said, leaning in to kiss him. Lucas responded, but the kiss felt shorter than usual. She was radiant, as if floating among the guests, and he tried to keep pace with her. The party continued, and they shared moments of affection, exchanged glances, and knowing smiles, but Lucas began to notice details that would have previously gone unnoticed, the way Anna often stepped away to answer calls or respond to messages on her cell phone, and how she avoided standing near him for too long, always moving, always finding something to do or someone to talk to. He tried to push those thoughts away, telling himself it was just the adrenaline of the day, the excitement of the wedding, but still, the feeling persisted. As the party wound down and guests began to say goodbye, Lucas clutched Anna's hand tightly, needing some silent reassurance that everything was okay. She smiled, squeezing his hand back, and for a brief moment, he felt foolish for doubting. They returned home that night, tired but happy, or at least, that was what he wanted to believe. In the days that followed, their routine settled. Lucas immersed himself in work, eager to build the life they had planned together, while Anna seemed torn between home responsibilities and her passion for dancing, something that had always been an important part of who she was. She started going out more often for rehearsals and classes, saying she wanted to keep alive that part of her that made her feel free. Lucas supported her, even when it meant spending more time alone. He knew her freedom was important, but he couldn't help but feel a slight unease as he realized how increasingly full her schedule had become. Weeks passed, and Lucas noticed subtle changes. Anna seemed more distracted, her phone always nearby, and moments of intimacy between them began to dwindle. He tried to convince himself that this was merely an adjustment to married life, that the stress and new responsibilities could be taking a toll on them both, but silently, something continued to bother him. He started paying closer attention to details he previously ignored: the different perfume that lingered when she returned home, the excuses about being late, and the furtive smile she wore while scrolling through her cell phone. Lucas fought against his thoughts, telling himself he was exaggerating, that she had never given him reason to be suspicious. But doubt, once planted, began to grow. He found himself analyzing every word spoken, every expression, searching for signs that could confirm or dispel his fears. Some nights, he watched Anna sleep next to him, trying to extract answers from her peaceful face, but all he felt was a growing emptiness, as if something had changed between them without him knowing how or why. The tension increased as days turned into weeks. Lucas struggled to maintain balance, avoiding confrontations or questions that could seem invasive. He wanted to trust her, to believe that everything was okay, but the signs grew harder to ignore. Anna continued to leave frequently, always with plausible justifications, but he began to sense that his patience was wearing thin. What once felt like an unbreakable connection now seemed fragile, as if any wrong move could shatter it for good. Lucas clung to hope, wishing it was merely a misunderstanding, a phase they would outgrow, but deep down, something warned him the truth was about to emerge, and he wasn't sure he was ready to face it. As Anna continued to smile and go about her routine as if nothing was wrong, Lucas felt the weight of uncertainty growing. He didn't know what he would do if he discovered something he couldn't ignore. He just knew that, one way or another, he needed to know. When he finally made the decision to follow his instincts, what he found was far greater than he expected, something that would change everything. Lucas woke that morning to the familiar smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the house, a scent that once brought him comfort, now laden with an unfamiliar weight. He descended the stairs slowly, his gaze landing on Anna sitting at the table with her cell phone in hand, smiling at the screen. She looked up quickly upon noticing his presence and placed the device aside with an almost automatic motion, as though she had something to hide. He tried to ignore the suffocating sensation creeping into his chest, but the doubts surged back stronger than ever. In the last few days, he had tried to convince himself he was exaggerating, that his restlessness stemmed from insecurities and fatigue. However, every detail, no matter how small, seemed to fuel that growing distrust. Anna felt more distant, and even when she was present, her attention wandered. Lucas registered the furtive glances, the discreet smiles, and the increasingly frequent excuses to leave the house. He tried to remain calm, suppressing the need to question her, but the questions piled up in his mind. Who were those people she was always messaging? Why did she seem so happy away from him yet disconnected when they were together? He needed answers. Later that afternoon, Lucas decided to follow her. His heart raced wildly as he watched her get into the car and drive toward the city center. His hands sweated against the steering wheel, and each kilometer seemed to thicken the air inside. He felt ridiculous for being in this situation, but the need for truth overwhelmed any flicker of embarrassment. She parked in front of a small corner cafe, got out of the car, and walked in as if she were entirely at ease. Lucas parked further away and waited. The minutes felt like hours until Anna finally appeared at the door, accompanied by a man. They laughed, and the closeness between them twisted Lucas's stomach with anxiety. He watched as the man placed his hand on her waist, a casual gesture that felt far too intimate for mere friends. Anna didn't recoil. Instead, she smiled and touched his arm, as if that gesture was natural, part of a routine. Lucas felt blood boil and hands tremble. He wanted to leap from the car, confront them right then and there, but something held him back. Perhaps it was shock, perhaps fear of being wrong and turning everything into an irreversible mistake. So, he remained, watching as they walked away together side by side, like a couple. In the following days, Lucas became a shadow. He monitored Anna's every move, every exit, every incoming call. What was once mere distrust morphed into a cruel certainty he could no longer ignore. He sifted through messages on her phone at every opportunity, but most had been deleted, as if she sensed the need to hide something. The few conversations he accessed were vague yet laden with innuendo, short, pointed messages that sent his mind spiraling, desperate to decipher what was truly going on. Anna maintained her routine, attending rehearsals and events, yet Lucas no longer believed her excuses. He attempted to confront her once or twice, but her responses were always defensive. "You're being paranoid," she insisted, urging him to trust her while never appearing concerned about dispelling his doubts. This only intensified the gulf between them. Lucas felt control slipping away, the woman he had married fading further from his grasp. One particularly challenging night, Lucas followed Anna again. She claimed she was meeting friends for dinner, but he knew that was a lie. He watched her park in front of an inconspicuous hotel, a place that might go unnoticed to anyone not paying attention. He waited outside, counting the minutes until he saw the same man arrive. They greeted each other with a swift embrace, one that confirmed Lucas's worst fears. Rage ignited within him like an out-of-control fire. He stepped out of the car and approached the hotel entrance, yet hesitated before crossing the threshold. He knew he wasn't prepared to face them, at least, not there, not like that. He turned away and headed back to the car, feeling defeated and humiliated. The image of them together replayed in his mind, a nightmare he couldn't escape. In the subsequent days, Lucas withdrew from Anna. He could barely look at her without feeling the pulse of betrayal in his chest. She noticed the change, attempting to draw closer, but he could no longer believe her words. Every touch felt hollow, every smile felt forced. Lucas knew he was reaching his limit, unable to maintain the charade much longer. The final confirmation came one rainy afternoon. While Anna showered, he decided to check her cell phone records. What he found were explicit messages, revealing the depth of her relationship with that man. The betrayal laid bare, undeniable. Lucas felt the ground open beneath him, the pain so intense he had to sit down, struggling to control his breath. When Anna emerged from the bathroom, she found him standing in the living room, holding her phone. She froze, and in that moment, he knew he didn't need anything more. Her gaze said it all. No screams, no immediate accusations. Just silence, one that conveyed more than words ever could. The betrayal was out in the open, but Lucas sensed there was still more, something he hadn't yet discovered. As he watched Anna try to explain the unexplainable, he realized this was just the beginning. He stared at her, his eyes penetrating her soul. The silence in the room felt piercing, heavy as the air before a storm. Anna held her phone, hands shaking, unable to muster the courage to lift it again. He had seen everything, the messages, the photographs, the meetings arranged with surgical precision to keep him from suspecting. But now, everything lay exposed. She attempted to speak, but her words faltered before they could escape. Lucas stood firm, waiting. He wanted to hear it, to need her to articulate what she had done. The betrayal hung in the air like a blade, poised to fall. Then it fell. Anna admitted, her voice choked, that she had become involved with another man. No lengthy justifications, only the pitiful repetition that it was a mistake, that it meant nothing, that she still loved him. But Lucas knew that words could not mend what had been shattered. Rage seethed within him, but the most painful feeling was humiliation. He was no longer the man who blindly trusted the woman he loved. Now, he was someone betrayed, exposed, thrown out of his own life without warning. Anna cried, pleading for a chance to explain herself, but he cut her off, his voice firm and sharp. He demanded to know everything, not just the dates and the lies, but about who she truly was. The woman before him no longer resembled the one he had chosen to share his life with. Anna relented, collapsing before him and beginning to speak, each word falling like a bitter confession. She recounted moments of feeling lost, the emptiness that consumed her even as she stood next to him, but none of that justified her actions. Lucas remained still, absorbing every detail, every apology, until something in his expression shifted. He asked the question that had gnawed at him since he first followed her, and that's when the real secret surfaced. Anna looked away, her lips trembling, and finally revealed that the man she had cheated on him with was not just any lover, he was someone who had been a part of their lives far longer than Lucas could imagine. The shock hit Lucas like a knife. She sobbed as she confessed that the man was someone he knew, someone who had frequented their home, shared dinners and laughter as if he belonged to their inner circle. A friend, or so Lucas had thought. Anna continued, now almost breathless. She disclosed that everything had started before the wedding. The two had grown closer during preparations while Lucas was too busy to notice. Her lover was someone he trusted, someone who always offered help and guidance. While Lucas planned a future, they built a secret. Lucas felt the ground open beneath him again. Every shared moment, every conversation, every laugh felt like an insult. The room spun around him. He stood up, unable to remain still. Her words echoed in his head. He demanded to know why she hadn't come forward, why she continued with the wedding plans when she knew what she was doing. Anna tried to justify it, saying she was afraid of losing everything, afraid to confront the mistake she had made. But Lucas couldn't hear her anymore. All he envisioned was them together, conspiring while he believed he was experiencing the happiest moment of his life. Pain morphed into fury. Lucas turned to Anna, imploring to know who else was aware of the infidelity, who had been complicit in this cruel charade. Anna hesitated, and that was enough for Lucas to grasp. Some of those closest to them had known, friends, even family, who had seen the signs and chosen silence. Betrayal burgeoned anew, not just from her, but from everyone around him. Anna attempted to reach out to him, but he recoiled as if her touch burned. Lucas grabbed the car keys and left, abandoning Anna alone in the room. He needed air, needed to think. But the anger did not subside as he drove through nearly deserted streets. His mind raced, every memory now seemed distorted, every previous exchange carrying a new layer of lies. He wasn't sure if he could return home. The next morning, Lucas found Anna sitting on the sofa, her eyes reddened from crying. She pleaded for another chance, promising to end everything, to cut ties with her lover. But Lucas couldn't trust her anymore. He said he needed time, but Anna knew what that meant. Days passed in silence as Lucas avoided direct confrontations. Inside, however, he was plotting. He refused to let this go without consequences. Anna had destroyed his trust and ruined everything they had built together. Now, he would regain control. The tension between them grew each day. Anna strove to make amends, but Lucas observed her every movement, and soon, a new detail emerged, one he hadn't anticipated. Among Anna's belongings, he found a key that didn't belong to anything in their house. This discovery led him to a newfound revelation, one beyond what he could have imagined. Clenching the cold key between his fingers, the metal pressed into his skin, a constant reminder that there was still more to uncover. He stared at Anna, who sat cowering on the couch as if she were expecting a blow. Her eyes begged for forgiveness, but Lucas now felt lost. He raised the key in the air, presenting it as irrefutable proof, and asked in a controlled tone where it led. Anna blinked, averting her gaze briefly, before trying to respond. She claimed she didn't know, but her wavering voice betrayed her. Lucas advanced, breathing heavily, demanding an answer. Finally, Anna admitted it was the key to an apartment, a rendezvous where she and her lover met. Each syllable felt like a stone dropping into Lucas's chest, cutting deeper. He insisted on the address. She hesitated, but eventually gave in, writing it with trembling hands. Lucas left before he could second-guess himself. Anger pulsed through his veins, intermingled with a darker emotion, curiosity. He needed to see the place, needed to know how far it had gone. The journey to the apartment was shrouded in silence. Every corner he turned brought him closer to a reality he feared facing. Upon arriving, he paused before the door, steadying his breath. Then, he turned the key in the lock. The apartment was small but tastefully decorated, personal touches scattered throughout, colorful pillows, a vase of fresh flowers on the table, and clothes folded on a chair. A wave of revulsion washed over him. It felt lived in, as if this were a home separate from the one he and Anna had built. He wandered through the space, trailing his fingers over objects, each touch heavy with memories that weren't his own. That's when he saw the photographs, small picture frames around the room, showing Anna smiling, embraced by her lover. In one, they were on a beach, the sun setting behind them. In another, they laughed together at a restaurant. Lucas clenched his fists, feeling the glass tremble beneath his fingers before placing it back. This wasn't a fleeting affair, this was something much deeper. Suddenly, the door swung open, and Lucas faced her lover for the first time. The man froze at the sight of him, eyes wide. Lucas's blood boiled, but he reined himself in. The lover attempted to speak, but Lucas raised his hand to silence him. He didn't want to hear excuses, he wanted answers. He pressed him on how long this had been happening, and the man confessed in a low voice that it had begun even before the wedding. Lucas felt his legs weaken, yet he remained resolute, pressing for how it had all started. The lover explained that he had known Anna for years, that there had always been a connection, but everything intensified in the months leading to the wedding. They thought it would be brief, that it would conclude after Anna married, but they couldn't stop. Lucas felt words tangle in his throat as he asked if the man loved her. The silence that followed was the most painful response he could have received. Driven by fresh impulse, Lucas surged forward, grabbing the man by the shirt and pinning him against the wall. He wanted to scream, to unleash the pent-up anger that swelled inside him, but his voice remained low and controlled as he warned that this wouldn't stand. The lover merely nodded, visibly shaken, refusing to beg for forgiveness. Lucas released him and turned to leave. Upon arriving home, he found Anna in the same spot, her face pale. She stood as he entered, but Lucas raised a hand, signaling for her to stop. He declared he knew everything. He had seen the photos, heard the confessions. Anna broke down, begging for a chance to remedy her mistakes, but Lucas was beyond that. There was no returning, what they had was irrevocably shattered. Before he could conclude, Anna screamed, protesting that he didn't understand, that there was more to the story. Lucas stopped, locking eyes with her. Anna revealed something she had never disclosed. Her lover was not merely a random man in their lives. He was someone from her past, someone she had never completely forgotten. Before meeting Lucas, they had shared a relationship that ended abruptly. She thought she had moved on, but when he reappeared, the emotions swelled anew. Lucas felt the ground tremble beneath him again. It wasn't just a betrayal born of flesh, it was emotional, entrenched deeply before he had entered Anna's life. He turned away, unable to look at her. Anna asserted she had chosen him, that she wanted to build a life together, but Lucas couldn't accept it. Everything they had shared now appeared as a lie. He walked away, once more leaving Anna alone. He drove for hours, trying to process everything. Deep down he understood that nothing she could say would erase the past. He needed to decide his next steps, but presently, all he felt was emptiness. When he eventually returned home, he found Anna waiting for him, drained, as if she had spent hours in that spot. She pleaded to make things right, but Lucas couldn't be sure he wanted reconciliation anymore. He asked if she still loved him, to which she replied yes. But the weight of disbelief settled in. He couldn't trust that anymore. Gathering his belongings, he departed, leaving Anna weeping in. But another part of him, perhaps the most irrational, couldn't ignore the years they had shared, the memories, the dreams, and the moments when he had truly believed they were happy. Alongside it lingered a paralyzing fear of starting over, a deep-seated dread of admitting he had failed and chosen the wrong person to love. He wondered if he could ever forgive her, but the mere thought made him feel nauseous. Anna leaned in closer, her voice trembling as she insisted she would do anything to prove they were still worth fighting for. She promised to leave the other man forever, to change jobs or cities, even to seek therapy. She was willing to do whatever it took. Lucas interrupted her, asking if she genuinely believed that erasing the evidence would be enough to reconstruct what they had built together. Anna cried and begged, but Lucas offered nothing but a suffocating silence. In the days that followed, Lucas found himself trapped in a tug-of-war between anger and the fear of making the wrong decision. He began to avoid Anna, leaving for work early and returning late, desperately seeking clarity amid the growing distance between them. However, every time he encountered her at home, every time he heard her voice or caught her scent, the memories flooded back with painful intensity. He relived the joyful moments alongside the dark ones, and doubt gnawed at him until he finally resolved to confront her lover again, not out of anger this time, but from a need to understand. When he arrived at the apartment, which felt smaller and more suffocating than before, the man tried to maintain a facade of calm, yet Lucas saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. He demanded to know what bound the man to Anna, what it was about her that drew him back time and again, despite the destruction he was causing in another person's life. The lover attempted to justify himself, claiming he had fallen in love and never expected their relationship to escalate so far. But Lucas rejected his flimsy explanations. He needed to know if Anna was deceiving them both or if he had merely been the fool. The answers remained vague, but one thing was clear: her lover had no intention of letting her go, even now that everything was out in the open. He still believed he could persuade her to stay. Lucas left the apartment feeling ensnared in an endless cycle of lies and betrayals that seemed to repeat relentlessly. Upon returning home, he found Anna packing her things. She said she was going away for a few days to give him space, but Lucas realized she hoped he would ask her to stay. He didn't. He watched as she closed her suitcase and walked out the door, leaving the house steeped in heavy silence. In the days that followed, Lucas attempted to regain some semblance of routine. He returned to work and met friends, but nothing felt right. He often found himself staring at his cell phone, waiting for a message from Anna while simultaneously feeling relieved when none arrived. He knew something inside him craved resolution, but he didn't know how to attain it. When Anna finally called, requesting a conversation, Lucas hesitated but eventually agreed. They met in a park, far from anywhere that could remind them of the home they once shared. Anna seemed calmer, yet guilt still weighed heavily in her eyes. She claimed she was willing to wait as long as needed to prove she deserved another chance. But Lucas understood it wasn't that simple. He looked at her, searching for the woman he had fallen in love with, but all he saw was someone he no longer recognized. He admitted he needed time to decide what to do, but Anna pressed him, asking if he still loved her. Lucas didn't respond, he simply stood up and walked away, leaving her sitting there alone. As he walked, Lucas realized that the real dilemma wasn't solely about Anna or their marriage, but about who he wanted to become after everything. He knew he couldn't erase what had transpired, but he needed to determine whether he was willing to carry that pain for the rest of his life or if he had the courage to move on. When he found himself standing before the empty apartment, the surrounding silence seemed to scream, echoing the memories of what had been uncovered there. He looked at the key in his hands one last time before letting it drop to the floor. The metallic sound became lost in the emptiness of the room. There was nothing left to discover in that place, just remnants of a lie that had consumed him entirely. He walked away, feeling the weight of everything he had carried begin to lift, though he was uncertain whether it was relief or simply exhaustion. The phone vibrated in his pocket, but he ignored it. He knew who it was, and he didn't want to hear anything else at that moment. The next few days passed in a blur. Lucas immersed himself in work, attempting to fill the void that had been left in his life. He stopped responding to Anna's messages and avoided any contact with her lover. He didn't want any more explanations, justifications, or empty promises. He craved distance. Yet, his mind continually returned to that moment. The image of Anna crying in the living room, clutching her bags, still haunted him. He wondered if he had been too harsh and if he should have offered her the chance she had sought so desperately. But then, the photos, the messages, and the sleepless nights re-emerged in his mind, reigniting his anger, a fire that burned beneath his skin. Anna attempted to reach out a few times, leaving messages asking for forgiveness, professing her love and claiming she couldn't live without him, but Lucas no longer believed her words. He knew the love he felt was still there, but he also understood that it wasn't enough, not after everything that had been shattered. He needed to move on, and that meant leaving her behind. Weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon, Lucas received Anna's last message. She wrote that she was leaving, that she needed a fresh start, and hoped he could find her again someday once the pain had subsided. Lucas deleted the message without responding. He recognized that was the goodbye he needed, even if it hurt. Anna disappeared, and mutual friends mentioned she had relocated to another city, starting anew. Lucas refrained from seeking additional information. He preferred to maintain his distance and rebuild his own life. But fate had other plans. Months later, by chance, he spotted her in a restaurant, sitting alone at a table in the corner. She looked different, thinner, visibly more tired, but still retained the allure that had captivated him years earlier. She noticed him too but didn't approach. Instead, she lowered her gaze, as if expecting him to do the same. Lucas stood still for a few seconds before turning to leave. It was the last time he saw Anna. Her lover, however, met a different fate. Shortly after their confrontation, he lost his job, and with it, his reputation. The photos and messages that Lucas had unearthed ended up being leaked among his coworkers, and the scandal obliterated any chance he had of maintaining his position. He tried to contact Anna after her departure, but she never responded. Ultimately, he moved away, isolated and forgotten. Lucas, on the other hand, discovered a path to move on. It was a slow process, rife with ups and downs, but he began to open himself to new possibilities. He unexpectedly met someone who rekindled a depth of joy he thought he had lost forever. She was different from Anna, simpler and more direct, and Lucas found solace in the transparency and sincerity she brought to their relationship. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to smile without feeling guilty. The past hadn't completely vanished. Lucas carried the scars of his experiences, making him more cautious and attentive to details. He learned to value trust as a non-negotiable aspect of relationships and to recognize the signs he had previously ignored. He understood he would never return to being the same man he had been before all of this, but he also realized that this transformation wasn't inherently negative. The story of Lucas, Anna, and their lover ended like so many others, marked by betrayal, with pain, loss, and hard-earned lessons. Each followed different paths shaped by their choices and the consequences they faced. In the end, what remained were new beginnings for some and unavoidable endings for others.